While the Dark Knight trilogy is made up of career-defining, award-winning villain performances, there's one that is usually seen as the bottom of the barrel, and that's the topic of today's video, Talia al Ghul. Now, first and foremost, I want to say that that's a really unfair comparison to make any of the time. Hold any villain performance to the Dark Knight's Joker, Scarecrow, or even Ra's al Ghul, and most would pale in comparison. I know I've criticized some of these in the past, but the problem with those portrayals was never the actual performance. Instead, it was the perception of these characters. All these performances on their own are top tier. I don't think anyone with good taste can dispute that. But very often, they didn't feel like the characters that they were based on. I feel that Marion Cotillard's time as Talia al Ghul very much falls into that same category. There are definitely moments of truly terrible acting here. Like, that might just be the least convincing death scene I've ever seen in a major motion picture.
It's done.
However, outside of these few awkwardly acted moments, I truly think the actress brought her A game. The sometimes strange choices that are made are very few and far between. As her persona, Miranda Tate, she inspires hope in our winged friend. It's through her kindness and seeming sincerity that she's able to earn Bruce's trust, acting as a confidant for the once secluded and isolated Wayne. She's good-hearted, well-meaning, and is able to see the good in the world, in spite of being aware of all the accompanying bad. She's also able to see through Bruce's persona, recognizing his heart through his disguise. She really nailed this side of the role, and made for a believable love interest for our hero. As a matter of fact, I would actually say that I believe that there was a lot more chemistry between the two than there was between Bale and both actresses that played his best friend turned almost girlfriend Rachel Dawes. They were much more believable as an item, and in my opinion, there was also a better story between them than
Rachel!
Except all of that is just a ruse of the rogue. It's fiction masquerading around as fact. All of this is a facade put on by the villain. Her sincerity was shockingly insincere, as she stabs Batman in the back, or more accurately, the side. As Talia, she's tactical and strategic. She's a master planner who took it upon herself to take the torch from her allegedly demonic dad. She walks in the footsteps of her father. However, I actually think that might be part of the issue with this iteration of the character. When all is said and done, it's just a lesser version of a villain that we've seen before. I understand the concept of a callback. I get that a lot of The Dark Knight Rises was to circle back around to Batman Begins. But the problem is that at some point in time, it just comes off as an inferior remake. Like her father, she hides behind parlor tricks, gaining Bruce's trust by masking her true identity with a fake name, and instilling hope within him. Like Ra's, she's a cunning linguist, articulate as she is diabolical, using her speeches to get across life lessons and build trust within an enemy. The way she speaks feels very reminiscent of Ra's. Even the music cues are identical, with the music accompanying Talia's scenes being the same ones that accompanied her on-screen fathers in the first film. She's far too derivative of what's come before that she hardly gets the opportunity to make any kind of an impression herself. On top of all these problems, Talia doesn't really get a whole lot of screen time. As Miranda Tate, she was a B-plot at best. She was Bruce's second chance at love, a potential future for the character that provided some light when he was in his moments of darkness, taking a backseat to the brutality of Bane, the return of Batman, the subtle origin of this universe's Robin.
I like that name. Robin.
Thanks.
As Talia, who is revealed to be the movie's real big bad, she has even less screen time, doing next to nothing of note, and then dying off unceremoniously before she could fully see her plan through. Her true character begins and ends at her reveal. A reveal, mind you, which doesn't really work. Any Batman fan going to the theaters could see this coming from a mile away. Now in the comics, Ra's has a couple of children. At this point in time, he only had 3, 2 daughters and 1 boy. Talia was of course always the most prominent due to her attachment to her father and her devotion to the titular hero. More often than not, she remains seated at her father's side, being the right hand of the demon's head. His other children are far less eminent. They're almost complete unknowns to anyone who isn't deeply familiar with the comics, as neither get a whole lot of play. But his son Dushan, aka the White Ghost, might be the most unknown and underutilized. You could maybe assume that these movies were merging the character together with Bane, but in all honesty, that's not all that likely. The White Ghost is barely used and utilized in the mythos. With all due respect, he's not highly regarded and is mostly discarded. Talia, on the other hand, is equally as famous as her father, appearing alongside him in most of his on-screen and in-comic outings. It's hard to think of one without the other, whereas you could easily think of Rage without ever mentioning his other two children. So when the movie is referring to the masked man as the child of Ra's al Ghul, to most fans of the mythos, it was clear that this was a really obvious red herring. A Bane and Switch, if you will. Add to it that a new love interest who Bruce has entrusted his earnings with in the plot, and it makes it that much more obvious. Most Batman fans saw this twist coming, which, to be fair, also falls in line with the first film, as a lot of fans predicted that Liam Neeson would in fact be playing Ra's al Ghul rather than Henry Ducard. Although I think this one might have been more on the nose than that. As a fan of the source material, there are some things about this rendition of the Rogue that just don't sit right with me. First and foremost, Talia's love for Batman was always true. It wasn't a front brought on by her or her father's clever plans. Her affections actually almost bordered on the lines of obsession. She was entranced by the Caped Detective, and it was a mutual feeling as well. I've never been a huge fan of this pairing, as I've discussed previously on the channel, but I at least know what it is that I'm not a fan of. Talia's feelings for Bruce weren't disingenuous. The little heart that she had was filled with love for the man underneath the mask. I think having her play the world's greatest detective the way that she did does a disservice to both characters. Batman feels much more gullible considering that he's fallen for the same trap twice in this trilogy, and Talia seems like a much more shallow take on the character who is otherwise conflicted between her need to uphold her father's legacy and her love for her father's adversary. Again, I'm not a fan of the shipping, but I must admit that that's much more compelling than what this movie provided. Additionally, her relationship with Bane definitely differs from how it is in the comics. When the two do interact, Bane is actually interested in the daughter of the Demon's Head. She's one of the very few women he's ever shown any sort of romantic interest in, though she spurns his advances. Here, the two are depicted as being in some sort of sibling scenario. Talia views Bane as her protector, a guardian who took it upon himself to look after her and ensure her survival. I'll tell you what, to be fair, while I can acknowledge that this wouldn't work in the comics due to the characters being of a similar age, here I think it actually makes for a better story arc between the two, and I'd be interested in seeing this potentially translated somewhere else. It makes the bond between the two that much stronger, and I think on some level, it enriches both characters. I actually don't hate this change. It deviates from the source, but I think it adds to the story that it's telling. All in all, I think the character was unfortunately misused, but I think the performance itself, for the most part, is pretty good. The character feels less effective due to how little we see of her, but I don't blame the actress for that. I think she played the part well, but the movie didn't always depict her as well. Regardless, I'm glad that we got to see this iteration of Talia. She deserves more credit than she's given, and I mean that both in terms of the script that she was given and the backlash that the actress received. That being said, if you like this video and would like to see a video on the Dark Knight Scarecrow, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
"How about a little fire, Scarecrow?"
Now, before I go, I don't usually do this. I've had a Patreon for a while now, but I've really struggled with what to do with it. Luckily, the time is upon us where I can actually offer you guys exclusive and extended content that I can't make here on the channel. With new restrictions on what kind of content can be monetized or hell, even shown here on the platform, now's as good a time as ever to be placing my completely unaltered, uncensored, extended videos on my Patreon. I don't want to put my videos behind a paywall, but that's kind of the best place to put them for the time being. So if there was ever a time to give a stranger money on the internet, well, I would like to think that now is that time. Just so everyone knows, all the money I make off my Patreon goes directly back into the channel. Everyone who donates to the Patreon will not be seen as a fan, but rather a producer of said content. And you will be credited as such in the closing credits here on the channel. So if you have the time and $1 to spare, help a guy out. If you can't, I appreciate your time and attention nonetheless.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.